And we are now live. Off to you.
Hey, y'all. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kimberley Rampersad, and I am so glad that you're here with us this evening. I hope that some of y'all just passed over from YPT and now you're jamming with us because this is like the ultimate squad goals. Like, we're running deep, we're running strong, and we're so happy to have you here. So, on behalf of Cahoots and Obsidian Theater, welcome to Black Magic. Again, my name is Kimberley Rampersad, and I'm meeting you at the mouth of the Niagara River. And this is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee. I come to you from Treaty 1 territory, which is the home of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Dakota, the Dene, and the homeland of the Métis people, who I find an affinity to, being a mixed race person tied to something really deep. And I'm really excited to be here with all of you. I would like to invite Tanisha Tate and Quincy Armour to speak about the land that they are coming from, and the rest of our crew who are rolling deep from those places. Thanks, Tanisha.
Hi, I'm Tanisha Tate, and I am coming to you from Toronto, otherwise known as Toronto, where the trees meet the water. I think a lot about this land and the land that we all live on. And I know that the stories connected to this land are long and complex and painful and beautiful. And I think about what I can do as a singular person to show gratitude for this land and to continue to make it a decent place for all people to live going forward. It is not that yet, but I hope that it someday will be. And although I am not Indigenous to this land, I do understand what a history of colonialism is. I know what it is to feel that you are from somewhere that has been pillaged, that has been taken. And so, although I'm not going to thank the Indigenous people for letting me live and work and play here, because I'm not entirely sure that they have done that, I am going to say that I am deeply grateful for the graciousness with which the First Nations people continue to live in the face of so much injustice. And so, to the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Mississaugas of the Credit, the Huron-Wendat, the Métis, and the Inuit, I continue to wish you much love and strength. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Quincy Armour, and Mike Payette and I are coming to you today from Montreal, which is the traditional and unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, also known as the Mohawk. It's home to many nations, including the Huron-Wendat, the Abenaki, and the Anishinaabe. And in the Mohawk language, Montreal is known as Tchatchoge, or broken in two, which is because of the way that the river breaks around the city. And I just want to also share that over the course of my time at BTW, delivering land acknowledgements and hearing them, it's been a little bit of a weird relationship to have with them. But one thing that stands out for me is about a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I went to see a show at the National Theatre School. And before the performance, Todd Houseman, who is Cree from Alberta, acknowledged the land. And in doing so, he asked everyone there to take a moment to reflect on what it means that the land that we are on is unceded. And it landed with me. And I watched and felt it land with other people around us because we had heard it so often, but never really took a moment to really reflect on what that means. And so now, if I can just ask anyone, if you haven't already done so, to please take a moment to just think of that word, reflect on what it means for our Indigenous community. Yeah, it was very significant, and I just wanted to share that with all of you. I'm very, very grateful to be here tonight with all of you.
Good. It's my first time on Zoom. Welcome, Kimberly. With all of this, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge all of our ancestors and the lineage that we come from. I would like to acknowledge that perhaps as early as 1608, but I bet you it's sooner, that Mathieu de Coste landed here on this continent in what we now call Nova Scotia to work as an interpreter for the governor of Acadia. Our people have come to this land in slavery, as Black loyalists, free, through the Underground Railroad, as farmers migrating from Oklahoma, as immigrants, as refugees, and born free on this land. We come here with as many voices as there are in our singularness, in our uniqueness, in our umbrella of being African and Black. And I ask that our ancestors mind our words and hearts, that we can pay honor to them, that we can be filled with all of the wisdom and joy and magic that they have endowed us with. So here we are. So today we're going to talk with 5 of the most badass people that I know. I'm trying to keep my shit together, but I'm not going to, and that's just how it is. I have been following these people for a better part of my career. They are inspirational, they're activists, they are excellent artists, they are community minded, they are magicians, they are sorcerers and witches, they are conjurers, they are spell makers, they are spell binders. And so I would like to introduce you to the 5 Black artistic directors that we're going to hang out with today. I am really happy to do this, especially at this time with not only the pandemic, but this reigniting of Black Lives Matter 5 years after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, with all of this stankiness, with all of this muck. I am so ready to speak to these 5 artists and leaders about what they do, how they see it shaping and lifting, and also just spilling tea. Because sometimes we don't get together enough. And by we, did you see how I just insinuated myself there? Anyways, here we go. I'm about to introduce all of the badassery that is in this room. So Quincy Armorer, our artistic director from Black Theatre Workshop in Montreal. Quincy has worked professionally as an actor, director, instructor, and administrator for several years. As an actor, he has worked at the Stratford Festival, Centaur Theatre, Black Theatre Workshop, St. Lawrence Shakespeare Festival, Geordie Productions, Repercussion, Shakespeare by the Sea, among many others. He studied in the theatre department at Concordia University and at the Birmingham Conservatory for Classical Theatre at the Stratford Festival. He was the Associate Artistic Director of Black Theatre Workshop for the 2005-2006 season before he was named the Artistic Director in 2011. Welcome, Quincy.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Woo! Next, Wayne Mangesha, the Artistic Director of Soul Pepper Theatre Company. Wayne Mangesha is the artistic director and an award-winning director known for her groundbreaking work and community engagement. Wayne has directed shows across Canada that have gone on to tour nationally and internationally, and have developed into television shows playing on CBC, Global, and Netflix. She has also directed in London, New York, Los Angeles, and garnering an NAACP nomination for Best Direction, as well as multiple Dora nominations and awards for Outstanding Direction. She has been an instructor at the National Theatre School of Canada, as well as co-artistic director and teacher with the Amy Project for 7 years. In 2017, Wayne was named one of the Women in View's 5 in Focus, identifying 5 rising film directors across Canada. She was recently named one of the 50 most influential people in Toronto by Toronto Life magazine. Welcome, Wayne. Mike Payette. Like, this just keeps on getting better and better. I'm so sorry. Like, my cheeks hurt already. Artistic Director, Geordie Productions. The first time, oops, that's the wrong one. Listen, you guys, I found a different bio. That was much better. One moment, please.
I think I knew which one you were reading.
Yeah, and it was not the right one. Mike Payette is a Montreal-based actor and director who has appeared at some of Canada's finest theatres, including the Citadel, MTYP, Vertigo, Banff Centre, the Grand Factory, Neptune, and the National Arts Centre, as well as great local companies in Montreal, Geordie, Black Theatre Workshop, Imago. Did I say that right?
Imago.
Imago, thank you. Wrong
No
emphasis. Thank you. Repercussion Theatre, Scapegoat Carnival, the Seagull Center, and the Centaur, among others. His directing credits include Harlem Duet for Black Theatre Workshop, A Line in the Sand and Another Home Invasion for Table d'Eau Theatre, Hosanna, Choir Boy, and Fences for Centaur, Around the World in 80 Days and Reaching for Starlight for Geordie, the Quebec premiere of Héritage, along with the recent national tours of, is this Tashmi? Thank you. Of Tashmi, sorry, I just lost my spot, project, and Lorena Gale's Angelique, that was here in Toronto included. A frequent guest at the National Theatre School of Canada, he was also the co-founding artistic director of Table d'Eau Theatre and past assistant artistic director for Black Theatre Workshop. Mike is the two-time Montreal English Theatre Award recipient and is currently on the boards of the Professional Association for Canadian Theatres and La Maison Théâtre, and is proud to be the artistic and executive director of Geordie Productions, one of Canada's leading theatres for young audiences. Welcome. All this excellence. Tanisha Tate, the artistic director of Cahoots Theatre. Tanisha Tate is a director, actor, playwright, educator, activist, and accidental essayist who has worked with companies including Obsidian, Nightwood, NAC, Workman Arts, Buddies in Bad Times Theatre, and Soul Pepper, and spent 3 seasons as a resident artist educator with Young People's Theatre. She was an artistic mentor for the Paprika Festival's Creators Unit and program director for both the Toronto Fringe Festival's Tent program and the musical stage company's youth training initiative, One Song Glory. From 2013 to 2019, she has been a dramatic arts mentor with the Toronto District School Board. Also a singer and songsmith for over 30 years, Tanisha is a recipient of the Canadian Music Publishers Association Songwriters Award for Outstanding Achievement in Songwriting and is currently writing 2 musical theatre works. Tanisha has served on arts councils and playwriting juries, as well as advisory committees. She was heralded in 2013 and in 2015 by critic Lynn Slotkin, who bestowed upon her an inaugural Tootsie Award in the They Can Do Anything category. Tanisha's play Keeper was published in late 2016, and in addition to directing for theater, she is an audiobook director for Penguin Random House Canada. Tanisha was nominated as a director for the Pauline McGibbon Award for Unique Talents and Potential for Excellence, and teaches first-year contemporary scene study at George Brown Theatre School. She is a 2-time YMCA Woman of Distinction nominee for her commitment to artistic excellence and social justice. Welcome. Mumbi, this is your first time I get to introduce you as the new artistic director of the Obsidian Theatre Company. Listen, Mumbi is an acclaimed theatre creator and director raised in Kenya and Victoria, BC, and based in Toronto. She recently won a Dora Award for her outstanding direction of The Brothers' Size, which also won for outstanding production. She is the founder, artistic director of the experimental theater company, IFT, It's a Freedom Thing Theater, and also recently directed the critically acclaimed plays Trout Stanley for Factory Theater. Here are the fragments for the Theater Center and the ECT Collective, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Soul Pepper, and Oratorio, a theatrical mixtape for Obsidian and Soul Pepper. She is the recipient of the Toronto Theatre Critic Award, an Artistic Directors Award from Soul Pepper, a Pauline McGibbon Award, a Mallory Gilbert Protege Award, a Herald Award, and has twice been nominated for the John Hirsch Directing Award. She is a graduate of Soulpepper Academy, York University, and University of Toronto, as well as the Obsidian's Theatre and Mentor Apprenticeship Program. Welcome. This is wonderful. A few housekeeping things as we go on. Our events accessibility includes ASL interpretation from Marcia and Joanne. Thank you. We also have closed captioning from Kimberley McAndrews from the captioning group. So you can go to your optional settings and the little CC button, and that is for you. We will take a look, and you might see us hanging out a little bit later, so you might be able to watch this again on the Obsidian channel. And we encourage all of you who are watching to ask questions either by the YouTube live chat or on the Twitter, you can showing my age, using AD Black Magic. Lisa Alves, who is the managing producer of Cahoots, and Luke Reese, the producer at Obsidian, will be monitoring those channels, and so that we'll be able to field what's going on. Are we all ready? All right. I want to ask some questions, y'all. What I want to know first is, how are your emails? Who is emailing you? And what do they want from you? How many of these emails are about the work you're trying to do right now? And how many of the emails are trying to offset other things that are in this world right now? I will say, for instance, in my world right now, I have an idea of what I think my job is. And I have to really work hard to try and do my job, because I feel like I'm fielding so many things around it that have to do with equity and justice and Blackness, that I always thought I was always a part of what I was doing anyways, because I can't stop being me and wanting to big my community up. Anyways, tell me about your emails.
I mean, I would say, yeah, Kimberly, it's that thing. It's I mean, I feel like I'm saying this Toni Morrison quote all the time, because it's so succinct. This is the problem with racism, is that it distracts you from doing your work. And that is the thing that I think it has been, yeah, they're detours, right? Because the work that we've all inherently been doing, of course, is about naturally making space. And so to be able to spend the time to stop and sort of, sometimes it doesn't feel like a future focused conversation. It feels like explaining what has already been and what actually exists. And that feels like a bump in the road, as opposed to fuel for the ride.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think, you know, I think, you know, everybody on this panel would agree to a certain extent that, you know, just in the role of artistic director, generally speaking, the balance between being creative and the administrative work that's tied in is already an issue. And so, or a challenge to sort of mitigate. And so when you add on top of the discourse that is happening right now, that is already just like fueled within me, within us, within the work, yeah, huge distraction that a lot of the correspondence I've been receiving hasn't been creative, even remotely. It is all about advocacy. It is all about representing a voice, consultation, observing whatever best practices for an institution. Like, those are the conversations. That's the bulk of my work right now. And the balance and still trying to keep Jordy alive and still, you know, artistic and myself artistic is a real challenge. And I think, you know, I will say, you know, just looking at this group of people, we talked a little bit about, before about this sort of notion that we can speak creatively about and related to who we are as people is a really exciting thing, because it's such an anomaly during this period of time.
Yeah, 2 weeks in, I called Philip Aiken and I was like, you never told me about the emails. I was so overwhelmed by the emails. Like it's like the one part I didn't think about in terms of becoming an AD, but the overwhelming, like it was like day one, we are like, oh, Mombi has started. Day 7, I was lying flat on my back in terms of like all the emails that came in. So I'm just learning this new email game of the different categorizations of focus and what to focus on and what to leave for later or what you just don't have time for. Yeah.
So yes, please, Quincy.
No, I was just gonna just add in, like, yeah, same, more of the same, the emails, the lack of being able to focus on those things that are artistic, and in many cases, the I don't know, I feel like I've become a casting agent more than anything else over this past little while, with people who are calling the Black organization to, hey, can you help me find some Black people? And as much as I want artists to be employed as much as we can be, I'm reflecting a lot on where that's coming from and what the intentions are behind it, because they are not all always going to be resulting in spaces that we might want our artists to be a part of. And so that's been a lot of what's been reflecting in my brain.
Great. So what are the spaces that we want our artists to be a part of? I would imagine you are caretakers, and you would be some of the greatest spaces for our artists and for our art. What are the things that you are continuing to fight for in your theaters right now to make those spaces the spaces they should be for us?
I mean, I think I'm pretty lucky in the sense that I run a theater for marginalized artists. And so where a lot of my interest naturally lies, which is in marginalized artists and giving them opportunities, that's the mandate of my company. And so I get to do that just inherently. But I'm always thinking about which companies would you want people that you really care about and whose future you really care about to be working at. And, there are companies that are on that list and there are companies that are not on that list. And obviously companies led by people that are as caring and nurturing and specifically on it as the people here tonight. I would say, yeah, none of the companies is perfect. My company isn't perfect, but at least that there is a guiding force there that's trying to make those places better places. But there are definitely companies that, even if someone wanted to do a contract there, I would tell them to think long and hard, because what they may make in money, they may pay a bigger cost in other ways. So that's what I would say. But I think I think the 5 of us are all pushing really hard to create spaces around us that are nurturing and uplifting for anybody that walks into them. But it's a hard road. The bigger the company, the harder the road too.
And I'm curious about what the difference is between, say, Tanisha, Mumbi, and Quincy. What's the difference in the spaces that you are creating to hold the work, to hold us in the work? And what's the difference then between those companies and, say, Wayne's company and Mike's company, that are a mixed space, that don't come naturally from a tradition of other voices, our voice, marginalized voices, voices of color? And I would love to know what the difference is between these two organizations, because I feel like it's just a different dance and a different jam.
Yeah, I mean, for me coming into Soul Pepper, a big part of that first year was structural changes, like major structural changes. We quickly talked about our strategic plan. We added radically inclusive in our strategic plan and in our mandate. And so that was the first step to say, okay, how do we then do the checks and balances about how we're actually structuring the company? So one of the major things we had to look at was pay equity. So we had to do, it was basically a whole change in our pay structure, because our old pay structure worked very much with this idea of ensemble. Many people were we're a big ensemble company. but it does, as a company, understanding that for very many years, it had only white stories on those stages. It compensates for people who've been at the company for a long time. So it just doesn't work in this new model where we're talking about inclusion in a real way, and value in real ways. One of those ways is monetary, and we can't have people up there getting paid different. So those like, I spent a lot of the first year, just before we even got to the creative programming, with the team, all of us talking about, what does it mean to be radically inclusive? What does that mean to make radical gestures? Because we have to build a social trust. If we've excluded a community, whether or not you think you're doing it intentionally or not, if it's happened by looking at the facts, what do you do then to create that trust? And so, yeah, so pay structure was one, accessibility to ticket prices was one. We now have under 25 and under is free. There's $25 tickets at every show we do. So accessibility is one. Yeah, the way that artists were treated is one. Also the way that we look at the process, the creative process, just being able to, like, we did our first Indigenous-led production last year, and we sort of we structured everything different, even the way that we dealt with press. And that was sort of just giving a lot of space for Janny, the director, to help mold that. So yeah, a lot of it is, it's structural, as opposed to sort of being in a position where that structure already exists. And I can just thinking about commissioning, I was like, we have to have the structure to be able to actually hold these artists in a way that has equity in it, so that everybody can be working from the same sense of empowerment. Oh, you're muted, Kim.
You guys, my first day.
I got you, girl.
Bless, thank you. Mike, what was the structure like for you? Did you feel like you had to shift it, or did you feel that you could kind of elbow your way into it, or how did you negotiate it?
Yeah. Well, I think I think my in was actually examining who was making our audience and who was not in our theater. The thing that, if nothing else, TYA is the form that celebrates empathy unabashedly. It's all about understanding of the other, the unique experiences of the other, shared experiences between young people and the adults in their lives. And I really took that first year to examine who was in our theater and what our spaces looked like. And I saw that as much as there has been work in terms of visible representation on stages, the conversation around who are the leaders of the stories, who are the creators, who are the directors, playwrights, designers, who are charging these stories forward, that can create authentic bridges with communities that we are opening ourselves to create authentic collaborations with communities. So that was a lot of the work in examining, to the point that, which I didn't think was so radical in the beginning, but I think there was a particular reaction to pledging that we are going to ensure that there's at least half of the programming, at least half of the artists, at least half of the leaders of our stories have to come from the non-white communities, in particular non-cis white communities. And that was not a debate for me, but in terms of sort of slowly steering the rudder of the ship that had for over 30 years practiced a certain way that has taken really nice steps forward in terms of this conversation, but the boldness of making that pledge, I don't know if Wayne had a similar reaction in terms of community or in terms of board or what have you. There was a learning curve in terms of being comfortable with making that step and doing that work, and really spending a lot of time convincing and educating as to why we're making those steps.
And I think it's interesting that you speak about those authentic bridges, because I think that for every moment that we don't build a bridge or that a theater hasn't built a bridge, that is an action of not building. So it's almost like the land is getting further away so that they have to put in twice as much work. To neglect a relationship is not to say that nothing's happened. It's the atrophy of anything that's potentially there. So I can really hear, especially what kind of effort that takes in building those bridges. I'm interested now, especially speaking about structures to hold programming. Can programming also push structure? I'm wondering if we can work the other way. So I'm going to ask now for Quincy and Mumbi and Tanisha, in your organizations, could you speak a bit about what it is in programming that you are shifting or have shifted from the artistic director that was there previously and now with you being there? What are things that you're just like, I'd like to try this, I'd like to move that?
If I can, I'll jump in. It's a really interesting thing being the AD of a Black specific organization, culturally specific, right? I think one of the things that I learned very early on when I became the AD, at least in the context of the local Anglophone community in Montreal, was when there was talk about EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion, that was happening or not happening at many of the companies in our community. It was almost like Black Theatre Workshop and T Street Junior Theatre as well were almost getting a pass. You know what I mean? It was the Black specific company and the culturally specific theatre company, and by the nature of our mandates, we were almost just like, you're fine, you're good. And for me, that just wasn't good enough. You know, I just felt like we shouldn't be getting a pass. We have to find, you know, just because we're culturally specific doesn't mean that we can't do more. We shouldn't be doing more. And I kind of, for me, found a way in terms of trying to find my and our version of diversity and inclusion within our cultural specificity. And for me, that came into looking at what our programming is and how we can expand that, diversify it, evolve it. And looking at, you know, what are the different communities that need to be represented within the umbrella of the whole diaspora. And so for me, I wanted to make sure that we started to take a look at international communities, not just, you know, African Canadian, African American, African European, and African with no hyphen after it. You know, a focus on Black LGBTQ plus communities, which is something that is really important to me, and I wanted to make sure that we were going down that road. So in those respects, that's kind of how I try to at least take a look at how we are programming, and I think it has shifted the structure to a degree, at least in part. It's not a perfect you know, solution or way of operating, but for me, it has, I think, made me be able to think a little bit more openly and broadly about what it is that we put on our stage and how we can be adjusting for the many different communities that we represent. Yeah.
Yeah, what Quincy is saying really resonates with me too, in terms of like the diversity within the Black communities and serving that. And I think that coming into Obsidian, I'm hugely aware of that, and also the outreach that has to be done to reach diverse audiences as well, to reach Black communities as well, and get them more to come to see our spaces, because it's the trend of mostly white audience members going to see even Black shows. It's still the thing that you see with culturally specific companies. So I think that just the outreach to audience members and Black communities and different shows resonate with different communities within the Black community, the bigger Black community, really resonates. And also just thinking about our reach in terms of connection. I mean, what Obsidian has, and just as what Quincy was saying, is that opportunity to have a really safe space for Black artists to just be able to let their hair down and just be like, I can be fully explore my artistry and not have to center to the white gaze. I can just be fully myself. So just being able to see how much further to extend the reach of who we are connecting with nationally. I mean, Obsidian has a national mandate, and so how to really expand on that national mandate, especially at a time like this when when we are in a pause, and how to connect and reach to artists, Black artists who are all over the country, who are needing that connection and feeling isolated in whichever parts of the country that they're in.
Cahoots' mandate is insanely broad. And I think that's the hugest challenge for me, because it's basically everyone that's not white and straight, like basically is our mandate. And so it's very POC centered, but we also have a deaf and disability mandate. We also have a queer mandate. And so one day I may be looking at doing a program for, Tamil youth, and the next day I could be looking at doing the program for white trans men. Like it's really all over the place. And I think that was the most nerve-wracking thing for me when I took over. And as Mummy did, I called Philip one night and I was like, help. Like I just felt so overwhelmed by how many communities I felt obligated to serve. And, and he said, there is a mandate and there is an interpretation of the mandate. There is your vision within that mandate. And you don't need to feel obligated to replicate what someone else did. Because I felt so bound to do things the way that my predecessor had done them, and the way that she had broadened the mandate and the program she'd created. I just really felt very obligated to not change anything. And it was stifling me. It was stifling me really early. And I remember, talking to Philip about it, and he said, he just asked me one question, and it just made everything so much clearer. He said, do you think that Marjorie is sitting over there right now at TPM trying to be Andy McKim? And I was like, and that's it. Because I knew the answer. I knew the answer to that. And as soon as he asked me that question, it just freed me up so much, because of course not. She was being herself, and she was bringing her vision to that company and taking ownership of it. And I felt like, okay, right. And so that's what I have to do. And I don't need to mimic anybody or feel like I have to replicate anybody. So yeah, I have lots of ideas for programming that are going to roll out over the next few years that are new, that I'm super excited about. And, I'm not going to start talking all about them right now, but I can say that there's definitely more coming. I am the first artistic director at Cahoots that is not Asian in the last 3 artistic directors. So that's a very different lens that I come with. And I'm Black, and so there is going to be a sense of Blackness that is probably a little bit more prevalent. And, I make no apologies for that. I think that whoever is in that role is going to lead with their lens. And so I think that the last 3 ADs who've been amazing have just innately led with an Asian lens, and I innately lead with a Black lens. So the company will change. But I think that's exciting. I think that that's what new leadership should mean, that there's a lot of morphing and shifting and newness. So.
Cool. So here's my question now. You are all up in this. There are so many more leaders out there too. So if there's a chat in the YouTube, because I can't see it, drop people's names so that we can big up everybody. So if there are the 5 of you right now, plus there's Janelle Cooper over in Calgary, plus there's Audrey Dwyer, plus there's Mel Haig, plus there's Tavia, there's all of this Black magic that's just pressing and pushing with this social movement where now, and disagree with me when you want to, please. Yes, that's what we're doing. But we don't leave our art for our advocacy. It feels like I mean, they motor and they kind of go together. What are we gonna do What are we doing now? What is your voice? What is your voice? What is your bridge building? What do you want to do right now? If you could program the thing right now, you could get that group of people together right now. You could do that piece of art right now. What would it be?
I really want to hear Wayne's answer to that question.
The show I was going to do got canceled. We were going to do a big black opera, Trumanisha, right? That was just gonna, I mean, that I'm just thinking about like things that have been brewing to answer sort of the question of, were we here? You know, did we contribute to classical works? I think I mean, my first season at Soul Pepper, we only got one play in and before COVID happened. But yeah, as far as like things that I was excited about, that, you know, in the light of the transition I was going through at this organization, I think what excites me about this moment is we don't have to tell the stories to talk about the actual circumstance of racism. We don't have to tell, but like what excites me right now is, what excited me about, sorry, I'm jumping around a bit, but it is about the large scale. It is to me that Trumanisha is almost, there's almost like a taste of Afrofuturism, because you're pulling from behind and you're looking to the future and you're fusing all these pieces of us. And I think, you know, we are free now to do something that is, it just opens up the scale. Like, I think when I saw Get Out, Jordan Peele, sci-fi, I mean, we need these genres to actually explain, like, you know, the kind of world, you know, beyond sort of the actual, the reality, the nuts and bolts of the reality of it. I think that this movement has now, hopefully everybody doesn't have to ask the questions anymore about what racism looks like, what white supremacy looks like. And now we go beyond that and we get to do the art. We get to create, we get to dream with something that doesn't actually hold us to some sort of we don't have to explore. But our experiences are, you know? I guess that's what I want to say, is that there's a bit of, as much as this has been a tough time for all of the emails and all of those things, I'm also like, I feel very confident that I don't have to answer a lot of interviews anymore. I'm like, you're good. You can read a lot of papers now about what the issue is. I don't think we have to have that discussion anymore, that there is an issue. And now we can look at a point that looks beyond that.
Yeah, I think we have the opportunity to go deeper, just to go deeper in all the stories that we are telling about who we are and our space in the world. We don't have to do the 101 work anymore. Hopefully, at least that's what I hope for. Or the 201, maybe we have graduated, maybe it's like masters now, master's level of just going deeper. And I mean television is like blowing my mind, all this time staying home and and is blowing my mind in terms of inspiration of like how we could fully go deeper in our Blackness and in this kind of stories that we're seeing out there, so I think that there's a lot of inspiration there. So not even beyond scale, but in terms of depth as well of storytelling.
Can I ask further about, from all of you, even, and it doesn't have to be attached just to your theater, you as theater artists too, talk to me about what has narrowly be considered classical theater and our bodies and voices in it in Canada. What is that for us? How do we take up space in that? And do you think that we have the power to redefine what classical is here in Canada? I'll start. Hells yeah. I think that our bodies make more meaning out of everything. I love seeing us directing, designing, speaking the text. I think it just adds a whole richness and depth to things that might have not actually been there. I feel like it aerates a whole play, that all of a sudden it's refreshed and revived if it's been done some way that has necessarily excluded us. And all of a sudden you have these voices and these bodies in space taking up that space, endowing that space. Anyways, I just wanted to know how y'all felt about that.
I thought you were actually referring to expanding the idea of the canon.
Yes, both of them, expanding what it is and also in what it's been traditionally.
Two things that are really important. One of them is like, I hopefully through this movement, one thing that can die a death is just colorblind casting and that whole thing. You know, like if we're going to talk about classical work, great, they're incredible stories. Yes, we should inhabit them. And let's recognize who we are in the stage while we're on the stage, while we're inhabiting them, because a lot of them are written at times that were problematic. We just have to acknowledge those things. And if that show's not intersecting with that, it's very difficult for me. That's one thing. And the second thing is like actually, Tanisha, if you're talking about Soul Pepper, the project that I have brewing, my next project I have brewing, is addressing this idea of classical canon. In a large way, and it's radio. So I mean, obviously, sort of talking about what that project is. That is, I have a real desire to address this question of classical, what it means, and that one could fathom that it could be claimed by a section of our globe, you know, as opposed to just understanding like, oh wow, I have been shielded from parts of this world. And so that is something I'm really excited about shattering.
Break it down, change it up, evolve, move on. It's time to, you know, we've heard these conversations before outside of this context where we question like the merit of certain work, and not more than any other time, but especially during this time. And with this glorious resurgence of new generations of voices coming and building their own work, now is absolutely the time to strip the systems, to break open how we categorize various kinds of theater and so this is I think it's an exciting time. I don't know if I'm breaking up. Can you all hear me if I'm in and out? Okay, cool. Something that I'm really looking forward to, and you know, with the company, but also with myself, is like just furthering the engagement of implicating community with the art, that there's a direct relationship between society and the arts all the time. So it means about integrating like long gestation creative periods with community members and artists and learning from each other. There's this project that is diving into Black mental health, but within youth, that I'm really excited about, and creating a large-scale play surrounding that. So those are the kinds of things that I'm curious about, because especially in the realm, again, with TYA, is that this is a question of access to theater, knowing that, you know, everyone should be allowed to be engaged, and so that's the exciting work ahead. But it's only now, and I'm going into my 5th season, it's really only now, going with what Tanisha was saying with Marjorie and Phil, is that I'm only landing at not apologizing for what it is that I've wanted to, that we have been doing, what it is that I want to do. I now give 0 Fs, and I'm like, we're doing it. Let's go. And basically at this point in time, I'm like, I'm with the company. You chose me, you love me. So, you know, this is what I do. So let's keep going at the end of the day. And I'm 5 years in, you know? So if there's a time to settle, it's during this pandemic. But now I've gone to the other side where I don't feel like I have to apologize for the work that I want to do.
That's what I find so, oh, go ahead, Quincy. I'll speak after you.
Well, no, I just wanted to throw in there, like, I think similar to what Mike is saying, I'm going into my 10th at BTW, and I feel like I kind of did the wave thing. I think I came in really strong and unapologetic, and I was going to do what I was going to do, and then I think I lost that somewhere around the way, and it's coming back now, which is really exciting for me, especially now that the company has started to grow a little bit more on a national level. We've managed to get a little bit more funding, so we're able to do more. And that's one of the really exciting things for me. When I came in, we were producing one main stage a year, along with our school tour, and except for COVID interrupting us, we were on a 3-year consecutive year cycle where we were going to have 4 world premieres of new works by Black Canadian writers. It's that kind of thing that is exciting for me, and I think. Yeah, I get excited about also just giving opportunities, especially, as the Black organization, at least in our, where we are locally. I think a lot about opportunities for artists. It's not just, what are the stories that we want to tell or how we tell them, but who needs to be uplifted. And that's something that I take very seriously. It's been a huge responsibility. At times, I feel like I've given myself a little bit of pressure, and probably a little bit too much at one point, to make sure that I'm doing what I need to be doing. And along the way somewhere there, I don't feel necessarily like I was at the top of my game. But where we are now, and what's exciting, particularly in this time, and maybe, I'll take the hidden blessing of this time to be able to have the time to reflect, is just what are the stories, who are the artists, what are the communities that need to be given that spotlight, who need to be, driven to center stage. And that's kind of where I'm at. I find it really exciting. It's a really, really exciting time. And especially because it's our 50th coming up, that was, a little bit of a blow. We had this big season that was going to be coming up over the next year, and it's not that season anymore. And it's so soul crushing in a way, but at the same time, I'm finding that rejuvenation in looking at these a lot of new voices that are going to hopefully have opportunities to be given a time, and that is something that I'm really enjoying actually right now, which is great.
So I want to talk about these new voices that you just mentioned there again, and I wanted to talk about mentorship in particular into what we do. That this is amazing, and that we know that there's a whole crew of us across this country, Black, African, theater artists doing this work. But sometimes it feels like, to quote a very smart man, that you're like the raisin in the oatmeal. And sometimes it's hard when you feel very isolated in order to do it. I am wondering if any of you, all of you, have had a mentor, who they are. You mean like tell me how what it was, how you met them, and do you mentor now?
Yeah, mentorship. Wow, gosh, it's everything. I've been really lucky to have 3 mentors, 2 of whom are still with us, and one whom has passed away. The 2 that are still here are Philip and Ellen McInnes, who have just been monumental in my life. I definitely would not be where I am without them. And they're very different mentors, because Philip was more of kind of like an opening of a door, more of kind of like a conduit, whereas, Alan was very concrete, like just kept hiring me. And it was really beautiful to have both of those, to feel like I had both of those wings helping me at times. And now mentorship is a huge part of what I do. As a teacher, as an AD, going back to our first question about emails, a lot of my emails are people trying to asking me to mentor people, a lot. Either people writing me directly or someone asking me if I can mentor their former student or their cousin's niece or their barber's daughter or whoever it is. Lots of requests to take people under the wing, which is, you know, touching and also hard because there isn't time to do it all. There isn't time to effectively mentor that many people. And so you can connect with people, you can have them kind of in your purview and ask them to, you know, keep you abreast of what they're doing. But in terms of actively mentoring people, you know, I only do a few at a time in terms of what I consider like concerted mentorship, because otherwise I think everyone just gets very little of me, and I don't think that's fair. But it means the world, and for young Black people, it is everything. There's so many Black theater artists that never had a Black mentor, and that has to change. You know, that really, really, really has to change.
I will just, sorry, after you, Sweets, please.
We have to remember to raise my hand or something too. I was just gonna add what you know, Tanisha was saying. It's like I personally, I'm a forever learner, so I am like a child or I've been mentored by so many people because I feel like I've needed a mentor because I'm always putting myself in situations that scare me. So I'm always like, help, who's here to help? So I feel like I really wouldn't be where I was. My road to where I am has been paved by so many mentors, and I think that you know, even naming them, I would forget. But I think as a young, when I was starting out like over a decade ago as a young Black artist coming, I was like, okay, where's a Black company? And Obsidian was that Black company that was like, okay. And then I was trying to find my aesthetic and what my personal aesthetic was a director, and Volcano and Ross Manson was really instrumental with that. And then, you know, they had so many people along the way. And then, you know, at Soul Pepper, Alan Dilworth was hugely instrumental in my time investigating the classics. So I think that, and I have to say what in regards to what Tana just said about having a Black mentors, I will never forget when I was at Soul Pepper and I got to assist Janet Sears on For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide, because that was the very first time in my entire journey of mentors that I had ever assisted a Black woman. And I felt like the wholeness of myself was affirmed, you know, like my race, my gender, everything, the way I could lead a room. There was so much affirmation. I walked out of there like feeling like I could fly, because I felt like all of myself had been affirmed through that process. But I think also there's like sister mentors, like, you know, like coming up and seeing what Wayne was doing and seeing the journey that she has been on, knowing that, you know, like friend mentors, I could call her anytime and she would be able to answer questions I have and whatever. And even if we never got to work together on a project until she was the AD at Soul Pepper, just they're like sister mentors, you know, and she was an instrumental sister mentor. So I think for me, I just think that what I hope is that I can be someone's, you know, I can help someone along the way. Maybe it's just by being a conduit. Maybe it's from working a long time with somebody, or maybe it's just by pointing them to someone who's a better fit for whatever they're looking for, or, you know. So I hugely believe in mentorship.
Thank you. And I ask especially too, because there's not as many theater educators to hang out with our young people right now as they're training. So I ask about that too, because until they get to meet, well, I mean, it's such a circle, until we are able to get more of us and our stories on the stage, that they see themselves, that they continue on this path, that these young people get to theater school, that we are in those schools too. I just recognize the weight that comes with who you are, the excellent art that you practice, and how important that voice is, because there is something so amazing that I remember about being in a Black rehearsal hall.
Mm-hmm.
There is something so powerful. It's stupid. That shorthand, that mischief, that trust that we will trust until it is broken. There's something that is magical because you're just like, I see something of me, of you, that we get to enter the work in our fullness, which is so different from a lot of other places where we have to do the work on the back end, on the front end, on the middle end to help other people to negotiate us, to negotiate the stories, to negotiate being in the space. And it's so powerful. And I think especially it's powerful for our young Black artists to have mentors like yourself before they go into mixed spaces, because it is the magic of you, of us as leaders being able to verify, to acknowledge, and to anoint these young people that yes, you are good, so that when they go into these other spaces and spaces where they're not captured enough or supported, they have us on their back and they get to strap us on. So I just acknowledge that from all of you, that I know that you do that, and the excellence that you talk about the load that you're carrying, the outside emails, the aspirations for your art, everything that's happening right now. May I ask each of you to tell me what floats your boats right now? Where are you going to look for that inspiration? What is that thing that sparked you right now, that's got you hungry, that's got your mojo going? Because I think that that is so important to what you all are doing, because you vibrate on a frequency like a hummingbird, all of you. And that's the gig. I recognize it as I see you all do it, but I want to know how you sustain that incredible amount of energy, excellence, and holding space for all Black people as one Black person in any single time. And I would love to know about your art too.
I didn't hear the last thing you said about our.
Oh, I just love to know about your art too, like not just like holding that space, but that art. What's got you going right now?
Before we answer this, Kim, can I just quickly make one more comment about mentorship?
Of course.
And just that I think that sometimes it's a scary word for people because they think it means taking like somebody's future on their back and being like their, you know, their champion and their guide. It can just be being the person that people talk to, right? Being the person, being the confidant, being the ear. You can be a mentor to people in different ways. And I don't want people to be frightened of being mentors to people because they think that it's one thing that they may not feel that they have the capacity to do. You know, Philip and Alan have been mentors to me so much of the time just by being the person at the other end of the phone, that I could just say what's going on. And it doesn't have to be a grandiose thing. I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, and if I could just pipe in with it, yeah, it's not, it never, mentorship, the notion of mentorship never feels like a top-down relationship. It really does feel like an exchange. And, you know, to sort of go back with the, you know, what floats my boat, or, you know, what keeps things moving, at least for me, is actually this notion of mentorship. Because I will say that the periods where it's been really, really difficult to uphold the things that you're mentioning, Kim, of which there has been a lot of those times that have been really silent and sort of eaten. So what somebody might see on the outside is so not what's happening on the inside, because there's a level of wanting to be strong for someone, for your mentee, for your artist, for your staff, for. But the notion of being able to pass down and actually engage in a conversation that isn't just about a job is a really exciting thing. So because it influences my trajectory on what I might not be thinking about, because there are folks that may be more in tune to conversations that I'm just not hearing, or have really specific relationships with that discourse. And so during now, there's like this reinvigoration of wanting to reconnect, or wanting to offer that notion of passing knowledge forward, but also with the notion of exchanging, because I will receive something from that as well. And that's a really, really exciting thing. It seems a little bit masochistic, but it's so not, or it doesn't feel masochistic for me at least.
Yeah.
I wanted to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Quincy.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just wanted to jump in there because mentorship is a huge thing for me, and connecting that to what's floating my boat is the word that was going to come up for me was community, which by extension is mentorship, or vice versa. You know what I mean? Like, I think one thing I have to say it because Janet's name came up earlier, and one of the things for me is in the trajectory of my career, there's like, if there were two books, then there's Quincy before the first day of rehearsal on Adventures of a Black Girl by Janet, and then there's post first day of rehearsal on that show. That changed me. Anyways, so Janet, thank you, love you. But all this to say that, I think in terms of the community is what's holding me together right now. And I've been reaching out for myself and have been reached out to so often in the past, couple of months. And if I think about the great conversations I've had recently with Mike and I've talked to Ina Holmes, and I've talked to Diane Roberts a lot because we're working on something right now. And it's those kinds of things that are feeding me right now. I won't get into this project that Diane and I are working on, but it is so super exciting, and we'll be announcing it a little bit later on. But I'm reinvigorated by the art, and this connects a little bit to what we were saying before about so much of what as ADs we've had to do. I'm assuming, I don't want to speak for everybody, but it's just been so much administration, so much government, so much bureaucracy, and I'm really enjoying to finally getting back into that art and to be able to share it with the artists that I want to be working with right now. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I should also note that Janet has been my mentor, Jen Sears. I talk about it all the time, and Adventures of a Black Girl in Search of God was my first professional show as I was for AD back in 2002. And what's that, you too?
Yeah, I was the, so it's just to give some extra love for Janet because I was her AD for that.
Oh, yes.
As well for that quick production. So much love.
Well, here you go, Janet Sears. You got it. This is what you do, lady. I tell her this all the time. And many crossroads, I'll call her like under a pillow, and she sets me straight. And I'm so thankful for her. When I first, I came out of university. Before I even finished university, I went my fourth year and I asked to do an independent study to do a paper called In Search of an African Canadian Aesthetic. So I went around the country trying to do interviews, and luckily they supported me. And it was one of the things I got to do in my fourth year was a project. And I basically stalked Janet Sears, and she let me be her AD, and then I never sort of let her go. But to be able to come out of university, not even finish university, and your first experience is a big Black scaled show that's dealing with Negro Creek, is dealing with a historical piece of Canada that's being exposed, that's dealing with ancestry, that's dealing with Black Indigenous people in the course, it's dealing with culture, African Canadian aesthetic, original mute, it's blowing your mind. So I came in, it gave me my strut. I came on the scene like, this is what we do. This is the space we take up, and why would we go, I think that all the projects that I've done that have been able to move up in scale have been because, well, why not? And I definitely credit Janet's vision. She always thinks that way. She thinks big. And Audrey Zinnia Mandiello too has to be bigged up because Be Current was my first landing ground. She saw my first show and I was like, between and after classes at Youth Theater School, I was doing my own play on the side. And I have to also say, because this is important, to big up Miss Scott. I grew up in Scarborough, one Black teacher, Black community. She basically mentored all of us. We had an organization called Blacks of the Future. I was the president. And I just want to shout out the teachers that gave us the thing. She was the one who was like, I never had any theater experience. She was the one who was like, you have talent, apply. And I really do wonder sometimes, so many of us were affected by Miss Scott and that high school in Scarborough.
Well, since we're all loving Janet, let me throw some because back in, I think it was 2015, while I was working as a resident artist educator at YPT, I got an email from the NAC asking me if I wanted to do some work for their education department. And I was like, sure, because I'd done something before. And I asked what it was. And they said, do you want to write the study guide for Adventures of a Black Girl? And I was like, yeah, I want to write the study guide for Adventures of a Black Girl. And it was so amazing to be able to delve into the play again, not just as a lover of theater, but looking at it like pedagogically and looking at it in terms of what did I want students to leave with and what questions did I want them asking of it. It was an incredible experience. And I, you know, along with doing the study guide, I decided to do this full-length interview with Janet, which was so cool. Because it was so rare to sit down with another Black person, another Black woman in theater, and be able to talk about things and have the other person nod in understanding. That was something that just didn't happen. It was so rare that I would be able to sit with someone and talk about what it was like, and that person just got it. And Janet got it in such a profound way. And I mean, I've only gotten to work with her a couple of times and do some readings together with her, but oh my gosh, everybody knows that when we were in the hunt for the Soulpepper AD, I was writing all over the place, please let it be Janet or Lainey, like everywhere. And so I was really happy. But yeah, Janet and Lainey, I have admired from afar for a very long time. So.
And isn't this amazing then when we talk about mentors, to see these mentors and see the cross-pollination between this group right here and the power of it. And also again, to the power of the scope of what happens if you get to meet us in all of our bliss on stage, and what that does to you and how that sets where you will grow your art from next. What is the power of seeing us and seeing our stories? And I know that that is a part of what you're all doing in the spaces that you're taking right now. My question for you next is how do you find, or how are you finding the people to give you the support financially to do the thing that you're trying to do? Where do you look, or is it more than money that it takes in order to create the spaces, the lines and the bridges in community, that sort of circular nature of the work that it seems to me that you are all speaking about, the circular nature of the work and catching more people? If it's financial, are you going to certain places? Or if it's not financial, what are those other gifts that you're looking for to help you do the work that you're doing?
You know, I have to say that, you know, Obsidian Theater used to have this mentor apprentice program, which is, you know, what was my way into professional theater. And it was so brutal when that was cut off, when the funding for that was cut off by Canadian Heritage. And even before I became the AD of the company, I've been mourning the loss of that company, of that program, when I think about all the different areas that, you know, it was focusing on artists who are not performers. So designers, producers, production managers, Black designers, producer, production managers, directors. And when it's just it's a bleeding hole right now, I feel, in terms of, in our community, in terms of giving that first stepping stone to so many artists in our community. So I just coming in, that's big question that I'm coming in with, is how do we bring this program back, and how do we fill this gap again? Because even though Obsidian has continued to mentor through the Obsidian Associates, it hasn't been able to have the same reach that it had before with this really well supported, funded program that it had.
We'll talk again, Mumbi, about that, because we still have our mentorship program at Black A.D workshop. I think we're going into year number 8. So still funded by Canadian Heritage. If it's helpful for us to have another conversation about that, then we could absolutely do that, because that program, I think I'm realizing now how impactful it really has been over the course of these years. And I mean, Mike can speak to it too. Mike and I started it together all those years ago. And just to see where it's at now, we need that. I think, not to try to, be like all Black Data workshop or anything like that, but if we actually look at the work that is coming out of the people who have come through that program and how successful they're being and the work that they're getting, they let us know also that they wouldn't be able to have made the inroads that they have if it wasn't for being able to come into this program and to be mentored, to have BIPOC mentors. And so, yeah, I just wanted to throw that out in there. Again, so yeah, we'll talk, maybe we'll talk. There's gonna be a lot of talking anyway, so.
I don't know that I necessarily have an answer to that question right now, Kimberly. I think I'd have to ponder that a bit more. I'm now thinking so much about that program, which also started my professional career, which I mourn the loss of every day. And I think losing that and then losing the professional theater training program from Theatre Ontario, having both of those things happen was just really brutal in terms of mentorship opportunities for people. Because between those two programs, so many young artists got to connect with professional artists and learn and study under them. And now both of those programs are gone, which is really horrendous. But I want to just go back a little bit to the floating my boat question. Because what's really doing it for me now is this very impassioned drive to shift our industry, I think, at what I believe to be more of its source, which is theater school education. And so I've really taken a huge step back from what I was doing for years, which was trying to, do things that would make theater company leaders change who they were and change their institutions, which I think is a fairly moot exercise. I really do. And I'm much more into trying to change the hearts and minds of experiences of the people that are going to be in those companies years down the road, because I think that's what's going to make a completely different industry 5 or 10 years from now, as opposed to trying to make some company that's just, like, I really believe that, like, white's gonna white, like I think that there are companies that were made to be led by white people, to service white visions, to hire white people. And that's what they do. And they do it, and a lot of them do it quite well. And a lot of them do beautiful work, but there's no desire of any real nature to shift that at all. There's a lot of talking about shifting it because that's what you're supposed to do right now. But it doesn't mean anything in the sense that 3 years from now, very little will be different. And so I've really just taken a big step back from companies. And I think that there are companies that are going to expand and grow and do beautiful things like Soul Pepper because they have a Black genius at the head. And then there are companies that will do nothing or will even regress. And, dinosaurs will die eventually, but I'm not interested in spending really valuable time and finite time trying to push this idea of like decolonizing white theater companies. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. First of all, decolonizing in and of itself implies that all the white people go away and you know what I mean? And they become like indigenous-led theater companies. Is that going to happen? That's not going to happen. And so, while I support the people that are trying to really exercise anti-racism in their spaces and move things forward, and I think some companies are doing good work, the idea that there's going to be some radical shift amongst the majority of mainstream theater companies towards this incredibly decolonized mindset, I think is I don't think it's happening. I'll leave
So,
it.
no, this is good. So now, if companies that are historically capture us and big up us continue to do that, at what point, and if traditionally white theater companies or white-led theater companies are able to flip gears because they will have us as leaders at the front of it, so then it's built into how that leader sees the world and engages with everybody. Is there, this is for all of you now, can a white-led theater company continue to be white-led and start capturing more of us appropriately, with respect? I mean, we could just let that swirl too. Like, don't feel like everyone that you have to answer, but these are the questions that I have, because I think that that's really important, especially when we see some of these younger artists who are so ready for justice. And you see them bumping up with this, and you're just like, press through, but also, do you take that energy and try and press through? Do you take that energy and build your own, or go to your own that's already there? Do you build your own? It's such an incredible moment. And I'm wondering from all of you as practitioners in this country, but also as advocates, do you have any feelings about that right now?
Yeah, if I could chime in, there's probably all, you know, the equation is really, really long, and I don't think there's a finite direction in terms of answering that question, but I do think there's possibility. I don't know what that looks like because I don't think that at this particular moment, white-led institutions know what that looks like. I don't know because, you know, as an AD, as an artist, whatever, as a director, we are drawing from our own experience. So there's already innately going to be a separation in terms of the vision and your ability to execute. And so that's the question, that's the challenge, I think, for all of us, but particularly our white-led organizations. I do think that there's value in really examining, you know, those who are Black folks who are interested in being in leadership positions, of whether or not a white-led institution is really your goal. I don't think that should be the litmus test for success. And we know that that's not true. And as theater happens in waves, and as evolution continues to happen, time will tell in terms of which company will survive, because the demography of our country, our populations, our voices are not getting any quieter. We're not getting any quieter, and our expectation is unabashed at this point. And so I agree with Tanisha, dinosaurs will die, but it's not to say that, you know, there might be some fossils and then you have Jurassic Park and then there you go, it's still alive. But that's a terrible analogy, but you understand what I'm saying. If I can draw back just for a second to your question of the financial, and I want to draw it back to, just from a TYA perspective, we're starting from the ground, from the very, very beginnings of the potential of an artist, or the potential of a community leader through the arts. And so I think there's definitely money that needs to be put into long-term relationships between art within schools, not theater schools, but within primary school, within high school, within middle school, really in the system. Because if we look at, I'll take myself as an example, if I did not have that access as a 7-year-old, this would not be my path. And I needed it at a point that I didn't know what my voice was. And so thankfully, there was a continuation of that work, but I was introduced to it at a very, very young age, in spite of what might have been decided for me, you know, in terms of a path. So I think there's a discussion to be had about what's within our education system, not our training institutions, but before that. And then it's reshifting the perspective of what we think of community engagement. That's not about community theater. It's about those bridges. And so that's we have to look at our our agreements, our various associations. The way that our system is built right now is not meant to support our work, and so, or the kinds of work that we do. And so I think there's going to be an evolution for that, but we really have to re-articulate our definition of community engagement. And before that, it'll be status quo.
Yeah, I think diversity has been happening for a while, right? Like you could talk about the largest institutions where there's been different BIPOC folks on stage, but that's not satisfied anybody. Like that's not what we're talking about representation. So if the question is, can a white-led institution be truly meaningfully inclusive? I think about, looking at what we're talking at our with the land acknowledgement and trying to make that meaningful and trying to think about what that means of truth and reconciliation and what our responsibility is as a cultural organization. Can we go on and think that in our 5-year plan we're going to have without Indigenous staff, we would make some meaningful, authentic place that will be magnetic for an Indigenous community? Why would we be that arrogant? That's all I have to say. I mean, it's we're talking about representation now. So yes, I think there could be a white artistic director, but where you have to have representation in that leadership somewhere to actually think there's going to be, because we already have problems with audiences coming from different communities, because you could put on a Black show once, but if you don't actually have a relationship that you're building, if you don't have the next thing you're inviting people to, if there's not an authentic an invitation, people are not going to come. So I just think it's about representation and not diversity. And people need to be, we know art's subjective. Whose subjectivity are we talking about? We need different people's vantage points. And I don't think any major needles are going to shift until then, and people are going to feel that.
Sorry, I'm going to unmute you.
Oh, you're muted again.
Can you hear me now? Okay, we were playing hopscotch.
My bad.
I'm a big proponent of truth, and I just would like people to be honest. That's all. And I think that if your belief, and then the answer to your question, can a white-led institution bring us? Sure, I think that there are some really great people in this country running institutions that are of a fairer hue. But that is not the point, right? I think that if you're going to start using words like anti-racist, then you have to walk the walk. It is not enough to even have representation if all of that representation is on stage or at low levels. If it's just that you have some Black actors and some Black front of house people and some Indigenous front of house people, okay, fine, they're represented. They have no decision-making power in terms of the future of that company. They don't have the power to hire other people of color at that company. And so that's why when I hear white, EDs and ADs talking about, decolonizing a space, I'm like, please don't throw words around because they're the buzzword of the year. You cannot decolonize in terms of what that means and be white-led at the same time. That is an oxymoron, right? And so if you want to step away and hand your leadership to Indigenous people or to other groups of people who have been colonized on this planet, great, then we can start having a conversation about decolonization. But while you as white leader, put on a Black Lives Matter shirt and say that you're decolonizing your company while you don't go anywhere is a joke. And so I just don't want people to joke. I just want people to actually consider what they're saying when they say it. And I would love the honesty of people saying, yeah, I'm a white leader. I have a lot of vision for this company. I really want to stay, but I'm committed to anti-racist practices. And I want to consult with Indigenous and Black people and do everything I can to make sure that people that are at higher levels of this company don't all look like me. That's someone I want to talk to. Not someone saying I'm decolonizing, but I'm not going anywhere, and neither are all my white friends. Like, I'm not interested in that conversation.
There's one radical thing. I don't know where I heard it from, or anyways, I don't remember what context, but it was talking about mentorship again, and gonna come back to this, tying it in, but in terms of assistant directors and whether it could be a process whereby the assistant director was a more experienced director, and the director was the one who has this vision but hasn't yet got all the craft and the tools yet, so that way they're there to support this younger director to be able to, they have a clear thing they have to do, but they need support to do that. And I wondered if that could also be something that's even thinking about in terms of this, what are we calling it? Seismic shift? What's the pronunciation? Seismic shift. But, just even in terms of leadership, maybe it's like we need to be more radical about it. Maybe it's like even the associate is the person who is actually who has those 10 years of heading an organization, and there's this young visionary coming in who takes that position, and the associate shows them the rope, shows them how to do it, make sure, and then takes a 5-year tenure to make sure that person is well situated in that position, and then exits, and then just a reshifting in terms of training the next generation, or thinking about the next generation of leaders. I mean, if we're really going to decolonize and we're really going to decenter whiteness, and we're really going to, allow for different perspectives, I mean, and at the same time needing to train people to be prepared for those positions, to take up those positions, like that's like a radical way of doing it, but may be necessary.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge how important it is that we just talked about the words that people are using, because that is what we're in the business of. So whether it be words that we're lifting off the page, words that we're singing, words that we're writing with our bodies, and just talking about what it is that people are doing, that we are in the business of interpreting and lifting words, and just realizing how powerful this moment is and our art is in terms of finding solutions and or a better way. And also acknowledging that in this group in particular, that the different ways of leading that we're talking about, leading circularly, decentering, all these different things are coming from all of you who are incredible creative leaders who are looking at different models and different ways of making art, and making art that captures and connects and uplifts a community. So I'm seeing you all, and I really appreciate it. I'm going to, because we have just less than half an hour, I'm going to take some questions from the floor. All right, here we go. What does equity and justice look like to you in a changing arts financial landscape? What does equity and justice look like to you in a changing financial landscape in the arts?
I think it's related to a little bit of what I was mentioning before in terms of the ability to actually engage. Now I'm very conscious of the word authentic. With community, we're engaging, partnering with community. I think there's a lot of, and we just talked about models, but I think there's a lot of conversation around vertical systems of operation. And I don't know if this is entirely addressing the question, but it really going into the notion of cohort or village, or where there's shared leadership with various, there's more and more conversation surrounding that, how that transforms. That's what I'm curious about. I'd like to see some of that work going into motion. I'd like to see companies in a traditional sense, not a colonial sense, come together and actually practice those things. because I think there's an association that if you work a certain way, then there's something that attaches to the quality, and we know that's not true, depending on which lens you look at. So that's what that looks like. I think, yeah, well, start with that. It probably looks like some other things that I'm percolating on.
Do you think in some of your theaters, and I would say maybe especially for Wayne and Mike, in your mixed spaces, do you think taking on, continuing to practice, it's built in your art, but that the social justice and the advocacy, do you think there is a cost or a risk associated with donors and or funders and or season ticket holders? And how do you bear that? How do you mitigate that? Or how do you take that on as a part of your work?
The reason why we took the time with our board to talk about strategic, or the words radical inclusion in the strategic, about those words being included. And it was important, oh, can you hear me? Okay. It was important to set the stage to say, are we all committed to this? You have now hired me. It's, you know, I'm the first person of color, I'm the first Black person in this role. It's going to take work. It's going to take that when we make steps, like for example, when oh, are you guys are frozen? Am I frozen?
Yes.
Am I back? Am I back?
Audio. Yes, you're back.
Oh, terrifying. Man, I want to get back in a theater. Anyways, yeah, no, just to say that, I mean, even something as simple as our Black Lives Matter messaging and everything else, we had to get the emails. We had to get people to say, well, thank you for effectively convincing me to never come back. You know, that's just the truth. But that's okay because we've already set, you know, that mandate is set with my team. That message was signed by myself, executive director, and my board chair. And so I think that the thing is just to I know, you know, I'm sure Mike does too. We know coming in that these things are not necessarily, I didn't anticipate like a rainbow ride, you know, knowing the situation of what I'm getting and where I want to go and what actually has to happen. I was trying to have as many transparent conversations as possible to set us up for just this very thing, so that we're not surprised and we're all moving together. And I know I need to know that people have my back, and that I'm not just here to be, you know, window dressing. Let's be honest, you know, we got to, if you're going to actually put me in this role, you're all now signed up for Activism 101. Here we go.
I think the I think the biggest in the early days, the biggest pushback came from some audience members who were uncomfortable with the notion that the company was taking on a political stance, and I put that in quotes because theater is inherently political. My body's been politicized, my race is politicized, like it's just inherent. So I don't really understand what that word means in that particular context. But and so what it came down to was really just reminding our audience, with the board and the staff advocating for this, because there was that agreement, like Wayne, if you're going to take me, then this is the work. You're all down for that. Was to help the audience, i.e. a white audience, understand that these conversations and these realities exist within young people already. And that you as gatekeepers, adults, i.e. adults, teachers, relax, because our young people are having questions about the other, about themselves. And so it is our job as a theater company to make sure that is represented, because theater is a representation of society. So if that is not there inherent in our work, then what are we doing? It's not to say that we can't take a classical piece and make it fresh and, you know, whatever, and whatever fresh means. It's not to say that that work won't be there, but it means that if we're going to bring it into this day and age, there's going to be a comment on it. There's going to be, we can't just do Lewis Carroll forever and ever and ever, you know? And so I think now there's a willingness, there's an actual want and embracing of that, and it's what has actually elevated Jordy to where it is right now, to actually to embolden that kind of work, as opposed to it being a separation of advocacy in art. It's implicit, it's TYA, it's the nature of the work.
I really want to address this whole thing about political thing to theater too, because so many leaders that I'm talking to right now, whether it be in art, other things, that leaders of color in this country, I'm having conversations with a lot of people. That's the discussion that they're having. It's like, it's become so radical now, it's political now. And this idea that the work was not political to me when I was going to it, when it was all white, is something to consider. Like, it had a socioeconomic reality. It had a very political lens in one world. It just wasn't political to that community, you know? So it's just this, I think these conversations are so great to just also give us all the language, and because, you know, we want to be moving in a forward direction and being able to talk about the dreams we have, and not continuing to just talk about that what we're doing and giving space for our life and our realities is no more political than anyone else's reality. I don't know. I just felt like that conversation is, I think a lot of people are dealing with that at our level of leadership, and it's just worth harping on a bit.
And along with the word political, another word that I'm getting so completely tired of is the word uncomfortable. It's like, okay, you're uncomfortable. Being Black is always being uncomfortable. This idea of, well, you know, we're having these uncomfortable conversations, and this conversation's a bit uncomfortable. I don't know if people stop to think about what it means for non-white people to hear over and over and over again that conversations about treating us like human beings are uncomfortable conversations. And I'm just kind of done with that. It's like, if you can't have a conversation about making sure that every type of person is dignified in your space, if that like messes you up on the inside, like, spend some serious time in front of a mirror, because I don't know what's going on there. I mean, the only thing that makes that deeply uncomfortable is if you are so set in privilege that you can't even fathom anything else. But, you know, every single day I have to sit on Zoom calls where some soft-spoken white person talks to the other majority white people about, you know, these are difficult, uncomfortable conversations about what? About being decent people? Like, it's difficult. It's difficult.
So now, out of others, it's interesting because other people are having difficulty, but we're experiencing also this great freedom right now, because as everybody else seems to be grappling with us, our voice and our existence, and we do ourselves as individuals, there is this brave new world that we are emerging and that we are going forward into right now, because it's all coming to a head. It's all coming to the front, that we don't have to be polite or mindful as much. Not that any of you necessarily were, I don't want to characterize that, but that we can just be audaciously Black in our work, in our voice, in these different things. May I ask, because we have 15 minutes left, I would love to know, in this voice and in this brave new world that we are stepping into, that we are creating, that we are writing, that we are in, and we're bringing with us, and we're taking to the future, where do you want to see your company with you as the leaders move to next?
You better call us out, Kimberly. Who do you want to go here?
Oh, sorry. I missed that for a second.
The question is who's gonna go first?
I said, you better call us out, Kimberly.
I know for me at the Shaw Festival, where I am right now, I mean, I'm not the leader like y'all, but I think what I am hoping for is that, first of all, that we get our voices on the stage, not only as artists, actors, but everywhere. And I feel right now we actually are coming to this funky head because we have so much representation in an ensemble and so little representation everywhere else, that's where the crunchiness happens, because we have such representation in one part of the organization and lack in another. So I think for me, in terms of the bodies that are here and who is here, that sort of great representation throughout will help disseminate best practice, will help disseminate the things that we choose, the way that we speak with one another, and then it will naturally inform and enrich the work. So I know for me anyways, in the things that I can assist with, trying to make sure that there are more voices everywhere, I think will really assist in how we treat one another and the process, which hopefully will result in the most dynamic art that we can make, because always bringing it back to the art. And that especially being led by Black voices and Indigenous voices, which systemically still receive the most inequity, the most injustice, that we capture everyone. And that through that hopefully that we can remove the inequities in the process, in the space for everyone, so that we can do it. So anyways, that's where I am right now, sharing 2 seconds of Niagara on the Lake.
I mean, given that I'm fresh in the boat, no, not a good metaphor. Anyways, fresh in the new kid on the block. There you go, new kid on the block. And I feel like, you know, I'm really privileged to be coming in on like such a strong foundation that Philip Bacon and Alison Seeley Smith have left. But I also have to say, like, I really hope that by the time I leave Obsidian, it's a much better resource company. You know, when I think about the story that Wayne was giving about working on adventures, and even talking to Alison Seeley Smith a few weeks ago, and you know, even she's saying we never started out to be small. The company was launched with this epic production of Adventures of a Black Girl in Search of God, and just how if the light is on Black stories and the light is on Black artists, how do we do the work that we're gonna do? How's Black Theater Workshop gonna do that work? How's, you know, Cahoots gonna do that work? And unless we have the resources, you know, to be able to have the reach and to create these unapologetic spaces that are catering to marginalized artists. So I think that's the thing. That's my dream for all of us, but especially for, you know, Black Theater Workshop, Hoots, and Obsidian, in terms of who are serving those artists and communities specifically.
I think I'd like to see Jordy continue the work in terms of examining leadership roles within productions, within creation processes, so that it becomes an intrinsic part of what it is that we do way after I'm out of the picture. I'd love to see I want to see our audience fully embrace the philosophy that we have, which is theater for all audiences, and without it being a tokenized, an initiative, that there's an actual home that every child feels that they have within Jordy, by virtue of the stories that are being represented and are deeply reflective of their own experiences. Once that happens and continues, like I can sort of go to sleep with that.
I would say that there needs to be more funding for companies that have these specialized, you know, racialized and marginalized mandates. It is insane to me that these budgets are still so small, and it shows you, you know, it shows you the racism in funding, right? And the fact that Obsidian is now 20 and it has so many accolades and so many doors behind it, and still has a fraction of the budget of companies that have done equally well with 10 times the money, that's a problem. That's a problem. It's insane to me that I run a company that's literally for like every group of people except for straight white people, and our budget is tiny. That doesn't make any sense. And yet you have these companies that don't even have a mandate other than like theater or Canadian theater or new theater being thrown money from left, right, and center, you know, and it's that's really upsetting. And so if you're going to make Black Lives Matter statements, and you're going to talk about solidarity with Indigenous people, and you're going to talk about, you know, fighting with the oppressed, then show them the money. Like, I don't see why that's complicated, but clearly it is. But I mean, if everyone's on a Black Lives Matter kick right now and it's genuine, then why haven't BTW and Obsidian's, you know, budgets should be completely amped up right now, so that we can tell stories about Black lives if they matter so much. Anyway, whoever is next.
Everyone's looking at their unmute buttons.
Okay.
Thank you.
For me, the thing that attracted me, you know, many of you know I was gone for 9 years. I came back for this position. I came back because the three things that I like about Soul Pepper in the mandate, and that I felt could be strengthened and brought, were the pillar. Like 2 out of the 5 of us both went through the academy at Soul Pepper, and now we're leading organizations. It's 2 years, it's free, and it gives people time. It's also the investment in the kind of theater practice. It's 6 to sometimes 8 weeks. So if you're looking at a different kind of aesthetic, if you're experimenting, if you're trying to create a kind of work from a different lens, you have the room to do that, and community engagement. So I think that training is huge to me, you know, which is why I spent a lot of my years with developing Amy Project and Sound the Horn. Mentorship is everything. I you know, I was speaking a lot before, so I just wanted to, but I have 3 mentees now, and I always tell them, like, I wouldn't be doing the work I was doing at the level I was doing if I didn't have that mentorship to keep challenging me and to keep me, you know, yeah. So I feel like the Academy, which is something we're relaunching, is something that I want to continue to grow. And I'm so excited about it, because I'm excited about that pedagogy and about centering different traditions in that pedagogy. I want to go to the school I wish I went to. I want to go to the school where I didn't actually have to create a whole other syllabus in my 4th year. And yeah, I don't, you know, so that's the thing that's exciting to me, and this idea of ensemble, and this idea of being able to actually, yeah, I mean, when I was away for many years, people always like, oh, Toronto, you go to there, you go to on the streetcar, and like, I've never seen the diversity, everybody lives together, but you still walk into our cultural centers and you don't necessarily see that in our largest cultural centers. So to me, it was something worth coming home for, because there was real conversations happening. So I feel, you know, I had to have that optimism coming back, and I feel like that is where we're heading if we all continue on this track. That is what's going to happen. That we can create opportunities, and that we can train folks, and that we're going to stop having the same conversation on repeat.
I love what Tanish just said about give us the money, give us the funding so that we can do what we need to do. Put us in a position as a Black organization to not have to make that choice between doing that other show and then but only doing stuff in a G category, or being able to grow our season. But sorry, Quincy, you got to find a show that's only got 2 or 3 people in it, not the one with 6 or 7 that you're looking to do. Like those kinds of choices have been a constant throughout, and it would be so wonderful to be a little bit more free and being able to, yeah, I'm gonna do the 3 shows, and I don't have to have a co-producing partner on this one. We can afford to do it on our own. It can have 7 people. We can work at an F category instead of a G for a change. It's those kinds of things that I would like to see moving forward for this company, especially as we're now going into our 2nd half century. When I'm no longer the artistic director at Black Theatre Workshop, I would love to see a Black woman or a Black non-male identifying person at the artistic leadership of this organization, because we have to go back for artistic directors in over 20 years before the last time that was the case. So that's something that's very much at the forefront of my thinking. And I want BTW to continue to be able to lead. Yeah, I want us to be able to do things on our own, but I actually do like those collaborative experiences. I like being able to sometimes, you know, work with other companies, sometimes the white organizations, and to have them, you know, come into our space for a little bit and see how we work and what stories we like to tell, and to see what it's like to have Black and POC peoples and stories at the center as opposed to on the periphery in relation to whiteness. There's so many things that I would love to see for BTW, and I'm hoping that this milestone here that we're at is going to be a great opportunity for people to take notice and to support and to really embrace Blackness at the center, because it's a pretty freaking awesome thing.
I want to remark on how all of you speak of community throughout everything in your rehearsal hall spaces, in the organizations that you run, in wanting to educate, wanting to uplift, wanting equity, wanting to have the freedom to tell stories and to tell that art with as much freedom and with as much joy as everything else. And I want to acknowledge especially that you guys all do it with such joy, even if we got into the muck a little bit today. But I see that all the time because that's what's contagious. And I recognize in all of you that you conjure magic all the time because of the space you naturally take up. Then you do amazing shit. But you existing in the spaces of leadership in all of your multiplicity, but being so joyously Black and excellent is phenomenal. It fills my heart all the time. I know it fills everybody's hearts out there too. And for all of us who you strap on your backs every day, for the people whose shoulders you stand on, who gave you that lift and that boost and that pop, so now you're flying, we are so lucky to be in the space with all of you. And I hope that you will come to know what incredible leaders and conjurers you are, because it's phenomenal to hang out with you this evening. It really is.
Thanks.
It's
very good.
It's been really wonderful to hang out with you, and thank you, Kimberly, for holding this space for us, with us, embracing us. It's been so wonderful. Thank you for your leadership and for your guidance and everything that you do. This has been truly, truly wonderful.
You know what? It's Cahoots and Obsidian who gave me this platform. So thank you, but let's big them up. And I think what's so special for all of you out there now, you know what a Black rehearsal hall feels like. It can have as many points of view and the process and the art, as many everything as possible. And there is the core of respect there's that feeling of excellence and the unknown, but we're gonna fly together. And I hope you all continue to find that and to fly with one another as we go off and make some really kick-ass art. Okay.
Oh.
Thank you
See
all
you
so much.
soon. Thanks everyone for joining us out there. Thank you, interpreters. Thank you, captioners. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you,
Thank you,
Sia.
Luke and Lisa.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Luke and Lisa. Yes, producers.
Yay, Luke and Lisa.